Hi VC, this is a heavy rotation video of a slight difference for me. It's a hard and heavy rotation, so it's just concentrating on the sort of hard rock and heavy metal genres. And I'm doing it today, or putting this video on YouTube today, 21st of November 2021, because it's a 40th anniversary. It's exactly 40 years since I went to my first live gig. So I wanted to mark that occasion. I can't believe it's been 40 years. It seems like it was yesterday. But yeah, shelf stacker back then. Went to his first gig, and it was to see Judas Priest at the Hammersmith Odeon. And it was a great gig. I remember it very, very clearly. It was a huge event for me at the time. Still has a big significance for me. I've seen Priest many, many times since, and they never disappoint. Even saw them in the Tim Ripper Owens years, and they were great with him. Glad to see Rob Halford get back in the band, but they were great. And I'll start off by showing KK's Priest, Sermons of the Sinner. So, ex-guitarist of Judas Priest, and he's put out an album which, to my ears, sounds like he's auditioning for his old job back. It's a really good album. I have to say, it makes me laugh every time I hear it, because it is so ridiculously over the top, cliched heavy metal. It's like every heavy metal cliche you can imagine is on here, and it's done without any self-awareness at all. And that just makes me howl. I love it. It's a really good album. I actually prefer it to the last Judas Priest album. I think Halford, Tipton and Downing were a fantastic writing combination in Judas Priest. I think without each other, they're somewhat diminished. And it's quite clear from this album that Rob Halford's lyrical contribution is sorely missed, because some of the lyrics on here are just make me want to wet myself. They're hilarious. I mean, it's a track. This comes with a CD of the album. There's a bonus track on here called "Brothers of the Road." I think that's what it's called. Let me have a look. Yeah, "Brothers of the Road," and the lyrics are the most hackneyed, cliched rubbish you've ever heard. But I'd sooner that than they were boring. But they do make me howl. But this is a great album. I mean, it starts with a track called "Incarnation," which is a doomy, portentous, spoken word intro with monks chanting and all that kind of stuff, and lots of thunder and rain and the rest of it. And then it kicks into the sort of the big track on this, "Hellfire Thunderbolt," which again, lyrically, it's like, what the hell does that mean? But it's just played with such enthusiasm. It doesn't sound like a bunch of guys who, KK's probably pushing 70 if he's not already there, and the rest of the band are no spring chickens. But the enthusiasm and the energy is incredible. Sounds like I'm taking the mickey out of this album. I'm not, because I love it when music makes me smile, and this is everything I want. Sometimes you don't want fine dining, you want a big fat greasy burger, and that is what this is. It is fun from beginning to end, and I can thoroughly recommend it. Really can. And the sooner KK's back in Priest, the better, but not to replace Richie Faulkner, who is fantastic. And get well Richie, if you don't know, he had a aortic aneurysm on stage and is recovering from that. So get well Richie. I think he's a great fit for the band. But with Glenn Tipton now out of the band, I think Richie can play Glenn's parts. KK can go back to being KK Downing and Judas Priest. And it'll all be good. So KK's Priest. And when I saw Priest, that first gig back in 1981, the support band was Accept, who I wasn't familiar with at the time. I had no idea who they were. And I remember when they hit the stage, I was completely unprepared for how loud a live heavy metal gig was. And that kind of was a bit of a visual representation of what I felt like. It was like, oh my God, am I going to be able to survive this? But 2 minutes into the gig, I forgot that. It was so exciting. And they were a great band. They were fantastic. They had the diminutive Udo Dirkschneider on vocals at the time. And before he had gone with his sort of camouflage combat gear and crew cut image, back then he was wearing like a all-in-one sequined silver sparkling onesie and had shoulder length blonde hair, and he looked ridiculous, and it was totally at odds with how he sounded, because he has this like growling bark of a voice. And this album I love. This was the album that I think they were touring at the time. Look at the year. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. Certainly I remember the track Starlight. It stuck with me. I remember, you know, the next day writing down what lyrics I could remember from the track Starlight, just because I thought I need this to stay in my head until I can pick up the album. So it's a German copy on the Brain label, and it's superb. I mean, except put at least one wheel on the thrash metal wagon. The track, the title track Breaker, you know, relentless double kick drums, and probably a huge influence on the thrash movement, which was to come along very shortly afterwards. And as were Priest, they were a big influence as well, with tracks like Rapid Fire. So I can heartily recommend this to anyone who's brave enough. Yeah, there's a mixture of styles on here. They do some of the sort of sensitive, almost Scorpions-like, lighter in the air kind of almost acoustic ballads on here. There's the odd moment of was it Midnight Highway, which almost sounds like a precursor to the sort of big chorus hair metal anthems of later years, but it never falls into that kind of slightly pedestrian cheese, because you've got these relentless twin guitar players and this animal of a drummer and Udo Dirkschneider on vocals. And it doesn't matter how hard he tries to sound sweet and sensitive, it's not happening. So brilliant band, brilliant album. Okay, this is an album I've been playing a lot. Satan Satyrs and Don't Deliver Us. And this was a bit of a blind buy. It was very cheap online, brand new, and I thought I've got to give that a go. You know, with track titles like Full Moon and Empty Veins, Won't You Be My Grave Dancer, Germanium Bomb, Crimes and Blood. It's not an easy listening album. What it is an album that sounds like it was recorded in a skip, a dumpster to our American friends. There is no pretense at production on here. It sounds like the 39 minutes of music on here were recorded in 39 minutes. You know, no overdubs, no second takes. There's one point on the final track, Round the Bend, where they try to get slightly sensitive and there's like cleaner guitar sound, and it's amusing because the guitar is hopelessly out of tune and they just didn't bother correcting it. I mean, throughout the album it's just heavy fuzz guitar. It's kind of doomy stoner rock with a sort of real punky attitude, a bit of a new wave of British heavy metal vibe in places. And the opening track, Full Moon and Empty Veins, it's just a complete ringer for I Want to Be Your Dog. You know, the Stooges track has even got this sort of one note hammered piano riff going through it. Yeah, I can't recommend this enough. I mean, it's a dirty, doomy, smelly album, poorly recorded, poorly rehearsed, but it's really exciting. And when, you know, when bands like Green Day get described as punk, it just makes me laugh, because there's nothing punk about them. They're about as polished and corporate as you can get. This is punk. I mean, it's a rock album. It's a heavy rock album. It's a doom rock album. But this is punk. This is, you know, warts and all, rock and roll. Great album. Now, for talking warts and all, I've been playing this a hell of a lot recently. This was a Record Store Day release. Def Leppard, on their On Through the Night tour, I believe, and recorded live one night at the New Theatre in Oxford back in April 1980. And this record was a revelation. I mean, I loved the first two Def Leppard albums. I liked the next couple, and then they just got a bit too MTV friendly, a bit too fluffy and polished for my liking. Still, you know, some good material, but, you know, I lost interest. But this is a reminder of what a kick-ass rock band they were. And also, I mean, I didn't see them back then. Obviously, my first gig was 81. This was 1980. But wow, for a bunch of teenagers, I think they were still at this time, they could really play their instruments. They had some great songs. And it sounds like such an exciting gig. God, I wish I'd been there. I really do. It's a double album. It features a lot of material off their first album. The odd track like Ride Into the Sun, which I think was only a single at the time. And there are also tracks which, under these titles, don't appear anywhere else. And you can spot the occasional riff. You think, oh, okay, they used that in a different song on High and Dry. Particularly, what was it? When the Rain Falls on here was just recycled. The riff on that was recycled as Let It Go on High and Dry. And you can tell that Mutt Lange got a hold of them, said, let's hear what you've got. And then he just disassembled the songs, put them back together, gave them a bit more polish. And in a lot of cases, he really did improve those songs. But the raw material is here. And this comes highly recommended, particularly to anyone who loved Def Leppard when they first started out and kind of lost interest. Superb, superb album. Now, anyone who watches my channel regularly will probably have heard me mentioning Motehead quite often, wearing a Motehead t-shirt and promising to show more Motehead. So I thought, Kiss of Death. I've been playing this a lot recently. Picked up this original vinyl copy not so long ago. Had it on CD since it came out. And I love it. Just recently finished reading Lemmy's autobiography, which of course is 20 years out of date now. But in that he bemoans the fact that people were forever coming up to him saying what big fans they were and would sing the Ace of Spades, you know, riff at him or something like that. He's just thinking, we've recorded good music since then. And too right they have. This is a brilliant album. I love it. Yeah, it sounds like a re-energised Motehead. They sound like they're having fun. I mean, still the sort of dark lyrical contents and the sort of acerbic, angry commentary from Lemmy. But this album is superb. Absolutely superb. You know, killer riffs. Superb drumming from Mickey D, as you'd expect. And stylistically, it's more diverse than you'd think. I mean, Motehead get written off as just being a sort of wall of noise. And they never were truly that. Okay, live when you saw them, they didn't do the sensitive stuff. But, you know, track on here, God Was Never On Your Side, which I'd love to have heard Lemmy do a whole album, a solo album of that kind of material. It's just him and acoustic guitar. It's almost like, you know, one of those Johnny Cash albums that was you know, produced by Rick Rubin. It's got that sort of feel to it. And of course he wrote songs for Ozzy Osbourne because he's a great lyricist. He was a great lyricist. So this album is highly recommended, as are many of Motehead's later albums that just kind of get passed over by anyone but the most sort of hardcore Motehead fan. But yeah, I do recommend you check this one out, and you might be surprised at what Motehead were coming up with. It's good stuff. Okay, something slightly different. Perhaps this doesn't quite fit in with a hard and heavy, but certainly they've had their moments, this band, and definitely quite a blues rock element to this. And this is Wishbone Ash's Bona Fide album. And this is quite hard to come by on vinyl. Yeah, I think it was only released on vinyl, you know, years after the fact. Another Record Store Day release, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was. So originally came out 2002, I think, and this I think is a 2016 vinyl reissue. And this is a really good listen. I mean, there's no sign of running out of ideas on this album whatsoever. I had the privilege of meeting Andy Powell on 2 or 3 occasions. A couple of them I just bumped into him in the street or on a station platform once and chatted to him. He's a lovely guy, very down to earth. Had a number of my albums signed by him when I went to see them at the Old Marquee on Wardour Street, and went into the dressing room backstage afterwards, and very relaxed guy to be around. Happy to chat, happy to sign albums after all those years. So yeah, this is at its heart a blues rock album. There are sort of some vaguely kind of Celtic type moves, the sort of thing that they did on Argus. Superb guitar playing, as always. I mean, it's gonna be. I mean, Andy Powell is such an underrated guitarist. I think perhaps at one time he was rated more highly than he was, but they've slipped off the radar a bit now, and it's time to reappraise him. He's an incredible player. This very nearly turned out to be the most expensive album I ever bought, because I'd been looking at the auction for this on eBay and thought, oh, I must bid on that, and then forgot about it. And put my phone in my back pocket, and I went out for the day, and I came back and my backside had managed to place a bid on it. How, I do not know, because I'd even scrolled off the eBay page at that point. But it put a maximum bid of £600 on for me very, very kindly. So my backside is responsible for me owning this album. Fortunately, I didn't pay £600 for it. I think it was 18 quid or something. But it could all have gone horribly, horribly wrong. But yeah, let that be a warning. Don't keep your phone in your back pocket of your jeans. And here's an interesting one. Again, regular viewers might know that I'm quite a big fan of UFO. I'm a huge fan of UFO. And before lockdown, before COVID came along, I'd been up in Manchester and went to my favourite record store up there, King Bee. And I'd seen this album in there. And stupidly I didn't buy it. Why, I do not know. I think, well, partly because I've already got a copy. I thought, do I really need to be buying that? It was 8 quid. A signed copy of No Place to Run. Signatures are a little bit faint because they're, back in the day, people actually used biros instead of those silver paint pens. But it's actually signed by all band members, apart from Paul Chapman, unfortunately. I'd love to have his signature on there as well, but a bit late for that. Phil Moggs signed it there as well. 8 quid. I couldn't believe that I'd passed it over. And of course, in the meantime, Paul Raymond, the keyboard player, Pete Way, both died. And I was kicking myself. I went back up there a month or so ago, flicking through. I found it was still there. Couldn't believe no one had picked it up. So I got myself a copy of No Place to Run signed, and it's a brilliant album. Paul Chapman was forever treated as inferior replacement for Michael Schenker. He was different to Michael Schenker, but he's a great guitar player in his own right. And to me, he'd earned his stripes playing for Lone Star, who were, it's one of my favourite bands. Their 2 albums are always on my deck. And there's great material on here. I mean, it starts with Alpha Centauri, which is a sort of moody instrumental, just sort of keyboards, guitar played just through the volume switch by the sounds of it. And then it launches into Letting Go, which is just a typical UFO rocker. And there's the big single on here, or was quite a big single in this country, it was Young Blood. Really, really good track. And I think it was probably the start of Phil Moggs, the vocalist's obsession with Bruce Springsteen. It's well documented that he was really into Bruce Springsteen at this time. I suppose UFO do their own kind of Anglophile version of that blue-collar Americana in places on this album and on subsequent albums. The next 3 albums really. It's quite a lot of that on there. And I love those lyrical themes. It's funny because I don't like Bruce Springsteen. On paper I like him. I love the concept, I love the lyrics, I just don't like the presentation. I don't like Bruce Springsteen's voice. I never have. I just don't think he's a very good performer, and I can say that as somebody who went to see him live to try and like him, and I was left baffled watching the crowd lapping it up, and I got no pleasure out of it at all. But someone like Phil Mogg channeling his, you know, Anglo version of how he views Bruce Springsteen, I absolutely love it. So I expect a lot of hate from Bruce Springsteen fans, but I've really tried. Still got some Springsteen albums, and I just do not get it. But UFO, love them. And the last one for today, perhaps doesn't quite fit in with the hard and heavy thing because there's no guitars on this album, or nothing up front that you'd recognise as a guitar. But it's most definitely a heavy album. It's a doomy album. It's by a band called Om, and their album Advaitic Songs. And you kind of get a feel for what the album might sound like from the cover art, that sort of medieval religious vibe going on there. And this is, like I say, not a guitar album. It's full of cellos. That's what provides the sort of the riffage on here, if you like. There's tabla and there's piano, and there's a mix of male and female vocals and some almost Gregorian chants going on here as well. And there's sub bass. I mean, this album will give your speakers a workout, not to mention your diaphragm. It'll get your internal organs shaking. But it's all played at such a slow, sludgy, doomy pace that you can put this album on in the evening and just kick back and relax to it, because it is just so down tempo and hypnotic. Absolutely beautiful album, it really is. And it's a double album, and it plays at 45 RPM, and the sound quality and the pressing quality are just out of this world. Really incredible. It's one of the most beautiful sounding albums I've bought in years. It's recommended to anyone who likes experimental music, because it is experimental. I've never heard anything like it before. Like I say, I think they get lumped in with doom metal, but if you can imagine metal played on cellos at a snail's pace, that's kind of what you've got here. But I encourage you to give it a listen. I think you can stream it easily enough. And you know, when I first heard it, I can't remember how I first heard about it, but as soon as I'd heard it, I thought, yeah, that's on my want list. I'm gonna get that, and I do not regret it. It's a spectacularly good album, a good one to finish on. So there you go. Hope you saw something you liked. I hope that if you don't consider yourself a fan of hard rock and heavy metal, that you still stuck with it and watched this, because you may have seen something that might float your boat anyway. So yeah, comments below. If you love Bruce Springsteen and can't accept that I don't want to know. Like I say, lyrically, I think he's great. I like what he stands for. Just as a performer, leaves me cold. Get well soon, Richie Faulkner. And I'll be back for more before you know it. Bye.